are at the table. I did watch back our web version, and all you could hear was snapping of your binders. So if you could maybe snap your binders at the end of the meeting instead of during in and out during the meeting, because it was very distracting and very hard to hear in between everybody snapping their binders back and forth. Because it's vibrating from the table, plus they're hearing it from your mic. So it was just, I mean, it was just a distraction for me. I mean, I don't know if it's for everybody else.
Jill, is this gonna work?
You want them all?
It was just, I could hear, every time somebody did it, I could hear it when watching back. And I'm like, that's just so distracting.
It's like being in a classroom with a kid clicking a pen.
That's it, right there.
The other thing is
Yeah, we weren't heard very well. But now everybody's got mics.
everyone's got.
So now you got to speak more into your mic so people can actually hear the conversation you're having. Is Sam all set?
I wish we had.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, 6.
Jill, are we not recording this meeting?
They are.
So what am I doing?
Are we
Just
doing
getting
that in a
rid of
different
the
way
file?
now?
It's just on the YouTube channel.
Keep
'Cause
the
I
third
noticed,
one, but
like,
get rid of
the-
all the rest.
Video thingamabob with
We don't need the
Yeah.
owl because it's just
Oh,
for
but this one says
YouTube.
no.
The owl was used for Zoom.
So where's the video?
There's 2.
There's one
I mean, I
up
think
there.
that's-
I think that's the only one that we use for YouTube.
Is that Google one on?
They have the presentation
I don't
going
need
up
to.
with their stuff. Yeah.
So the only camera that they see us on is up that way.
Yeah, and then when there's presentation, she does when the presentation is up.
Just wondering.
If you're wondering, others are probably wondering.
Right.
I'm not.
I am curious.
Anyone besides the SD part, the no SD part,
I'm guessing Doug did.
I think I got it back.
Oh, you get them all?
Yeah, I have SP and no SP.
6. My goodness gracious.
So this
I
one
mean,
is,
SP and no SP.
Just-
Which one's that, Kathy?
Just for number one, you mean?
Probably just easier
all
to
the
add
costs?
it and then just watch your
Oh,
tape.
I might not have it. I think I just have number one SP and no SP.
Where, does that go at the beginning? And
Number,
so we pull the cover sheet and the.
Did the entire 5 change?
two, I have SP, so I need a no SP for two.
Keep going, it should be at the end.
So this is 8 to the end of No 7.
Yeah.
How
so I
come
need
my
a no
7
SP.
looks like
Yes.
this?
Well,
Don't
that's
have
your,
three, there's no such thing.
Oh, you can get the other
That's
one
the
yet?
LRTC, right?
Is that
the
it?
only
Yeah.
one where we don't have people
Four SP.
and supplies.
I need a no SP for four. There is a no
I
SP.
have that, but I have a 5, 6, 7.
like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If everyone would stand and join me for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no agenda adjustments, correct? We will move down to 2, public comment. At this time, you wish to come to the microphone. Please introduce yourself and the town you are from. Thank you.
Yeah, let me see your back. There you go. No, I see it.
In the interest of your time, I set myself a timer. All right. Hi, for those that don't know me, I'm Ryan Crocker. I'm the chemistry, computer science, and former robotics teacher and robotics and esports coach at Oak Hill High School. After hearing Ed Lewis speak last week and some of the responses that I heard from our board members, I felt it necessary to come and also speak in response to the proposed cut to the 5th science teacher position, rationale and why we had difficulty in filling the position, and the impact on the students. I'm going to summarize my first 2 points, again, in the interest of time. So the biggest concern that I had with filling the 5th science teacher position was the uncertainty that surrounded it. Despite watching every school board meeting, special budget meeting, and public meeting since the pipe burst in the chemistry lab last year, when I was asked, is Oak Hill High School hiring a science teacher, my response was, I don't know. And that uncertainty bled into people applying for that position. There was the fear of the unknown. So I feel that impacted the applicants, and as a result, it became difficult to find someone once we finally knew for sure that there would be a 5th science teacher position. Currently, the science department knows of at least one individual who is not only certified to teach science, but has reached out to members of our science department with an interest of coming to Oak Hill High School. It is a child of one of the Bouchie's college friends. So the Bouchies are biology teachers. So there's somebody waiting in the wings to find out which way this decision is going and would love to come teach at our school. Secondly, one of the board members made a comment about teacher morale and their concerns regarding that. As a science teacher, I can attest that there's been a lot of stress this year. We found out on August 25th, only 4 days before the school year started, that there would be no 5th science teacher. As a result, we had classes that we'd spent the summer looking forward to that were cut, that were shortened, that were reduced in length, or given to other staff members. And we were left scrambling to prepare for what do we do without this 5th science teacher. Thirdly, and most importantly, is the impact on the students. As a result of cutting the science teacher, courses needed to be removed from the curriculum, rescheduled or reduced in length. AP Biology, which was going to have 2 class periods, each of a period and a half, was reduced to 1 class period. All those students were shoved together, and they spent the summer excited to learn about advanced biology topics. They found themselves squeezed into a class that essentially doubled in size. It would be 2/3 the instructional time per day. As a result, those students are losing some of the valuable instructional time, laboratory lessons, and individualized attention that is so crucial to passing advanced placement exams. Robotics was eliminated from the schedule entirely this school year, leaving students short on their schedule, and on the first day of school, seeking me to express disappointment over what they consider to be a fun, engaging, and meaningful course, given the direction that the world is headed in regards to technology. The robotics course served a variety of students, including those who are workforce ready, special education, and college ready. Computer science principles, a course that I was approached to teach in spring of 2022, was rescheduled as a result of cutting of a science teacher. This caused the course size to be cut from 12 students down to 6. My goal is to see computer science grow in our schools, as it is important to a 21st century workforce. We have had students who have earned bronze medals at Skills USA in cybersecurity FBLA just returned from their state competition, and it was pointed out to me that they have multiple computer science events, including coding and programming, cybersecurity, and network design. In cutting the fifth science teacher, we are seeing a reduction in the offerings of these STEM courses that are so crucial to our students. I'm skipping down to the last one, again, in the interest of your time. I beg the school board to reconsider its decision to reduce the number of science teachers. As we saw at the 5-hour public budget meeting on October 23rd, the public is not only willing to support a fifth science teacher, but voted to add an additional $50,000 to the budget line on warrant Article 1, regular instruction budget, by a vote of 92 yes to 57 no. Our community had the opportunity to cut from this budget line, but chose not to, instead focusing on other areas of concern when it came to approving a budget. But I understand that as a community, a 8.85% increase in the budget is difficult to accept. I beg that we consider other options before taking away critical curriculum in the STEM fields. Attached to this letter, I have included 4 documents. The first is the the first is the AP course request from students nationwide. You will see that 4 of the top 5 courses are biology, chemistry, physics, and AP computer science A. The second document, I believe, is the FBLA events list. And I have tried to highlight, unfortunately, the photocopier didn't show them well, all of those events that are computer science focused. To me, it looks about a quarter of the list at this point. And then the remaining 2 documents, one of them is job prospects for computer science graduates in the state of Maine. And the final one is a look at cybersecurity, which is a course that students have been asking multiple times that we add to the curriculum, and those job prospects in cybersecurity. I appreciate your time, and I will not take any more of it because I know you want to get home by 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing as there's none, we'll move down to 3, old business. 3.1, to continue reviewing cost centers 1 through 7, regular instruction, special education, career and technical education, other instruction, student and support staff, school administration, and system administration. And to then also start discussion of cost centers 8 through 11, transportation, operations and maintenance, debt services and other expenditures, school nutrition. All you?
Okay. All right, so I'm just going to summarize and then we'll get into discussion. So I'm going to probably nod to you. I don't have you've got the clicker. Okay, good. So we are going to get to cost center 8, 9, 10, and 11. But first, let's review cost centers 1 through 7. I just did a summary overview of what was discussed in those 7 centers, and then we'll open it up. I know Jill's going to facilitate discussion on each cost center. So just some reminders that there were no new positions put in these cost centers. However, there was a shift of 2 positions from ARP funds to the general fund due to the grant ending September 30th, 2024. So remember, we are going to use some of that grant for July, August, and September, and then the rest of the costs will be in the general fund. Those 2 positions was the assistant principal position at Oak Hill Middle School and the IT technician position. So there will still be a technician for the 3 elementary schools, 1 for the middle school, 1 for the high school. The other change was the assistant superintendent position, changing to a director of curriculum assessment instruction, and the ESSA director. And remember, we talked about part of that salary will come from the ESSA grant, and then the other part is in the general fund. As Ryan spoke about, there were 2 open teaching positions. One was the high school, which was science, and one at the elementary level, which we've discussed was the grade 4 position. The other change has been that the Dean of Students position, which was paid by ARP funds, would be funded through the general fund using a teaching position, which is because of the lower enrollment in 5th grade coming in, would be reassigned as the positive behavioral intervention support specialist to fill that void of that change. So those were the big highlights from cost centers 1 through 7. So this is an opportunity, I know we want to circle back, to have members ask questions, seek clarification, share thoughts regarding support and or recommendations
for the proposed budget.
So I know we've had kind of a difference in how everybody wants to go through this. But I think the majority had said they really kind of wanted to do a little bit of a line by line, and this is what your question is. So I'm going to go around to the table, and you each are going to have your opportunity to speak and let us know what your goal is for each cost center that we're going through. I think it's very important that Katie and Sam and the rest of the staff hear where you're at, what you're asking for, what you're looking at, but they also need a direction. So just to speak in general, you've got to speak very more direct and clear about what you're needing and what you're asking for. So Diane, I'm going to start with you.
I don't know what my goal is at this point.
Okay, was there anything in, when you were reviewing the cost centers, there was something that you had a question on or concern about?
No, I already sent something to Katie, and that was it for this point.
Okay. Christy?
Yeah. Yes, I'm working on it. Can you hear me now? Is that better? So I don't know if it's specifically a question, but I would love to, as a board, have some consensus around the teacher lines piece. I think we've heard some really compelling evidence for the high school piece. We did receive an email from an elementary school teacher. Those of us that live in Litchfield, heard from some Litchfield constituents around classroom pieces. So I would love to just have kind of a conversation at the board level around kind of consensus around the teaching lines.
So what are you looking for? What are you trying to are you looking to talk about whether you add teachers? Like, what kind of direction are you wanting?
Yeah, I think.
What's your thought?
So I think what we watched last year, and we were all part of that, was the outpouring of support for our teacher lines from the public budget meeting. And I don't want to lose sight of that. I think this is a line item that we can really make sure that we're investing in the places that need to be invested in, and to support the needs of all learners in the district. And I understand the financial pieces of it too. But as I think about public perception and public support, this is an area where I don't think we have to be, I don't know if the word is lean. I just want to make sure that we're best serving our kiddos.
So are you asking for the teachers to be added back into the budget?
I would like to consider that. I would like to have a conversation around that. And I want to bring us back to the thought, which was kind of the kickoff at the beginning, that this is our budget. So I want us all to be at a place that we feel good about it and feel that we can support it. And I'm not sure we've had that conversation yet.
Doug?
Right. Kind of the same thing, getting the emails and having discussions and stuff. I think for when I think about the budget and my involvement in the school board and on the facilities committee and that kind of stuff, personally, I have 3 major target areas I think that I feel are kind of crucial when trying to figure out how the pieces go together in this budget. The teachers is definitely one of them. I'm definitely on board with trying to have discussions with especially the 4th grade, the science, especially the science teacher position, those kinds of things. Support staff seems to be kind of an important one too, that has been brought up. And having looked at that and looked at the things that are going on, I think that would, going back, I do agree with somebody's comment about trying to help improve scores. I think support staff would be a key thing. We've had a lot of turnover and stuff with that, so I think trying to figure out that. And then facilities, obviously being on that. I think that the budget from last year, they showed a ton of support in having teachers, but 0 support in where to house them properly, because they cut from the maintenance budget to support the teacher budget. So it's all good, but if they're teaching outside, that's not going to accomplish much. So in my personal go to is teachers, support staff, and facilities. So those three cost centers are going to be three that I personally am going to pay attention to and advocate for as we go through.
What in cost center one are you advocating for? That's what we're talking now.
Yeah, I
Sort
thought
of
you were just
question or
talking in
anything?
general.
No, was
So,
there something?
Cost center one was the thing, trying to see if we can, again, in my mind, this is all one whole picture, but in cost center one, it would be the fourth grade teacher and the science teacher having discussions about seeing how if we can bring them back in a reasonable, and still have a reasonable budget, factoring in the other cost centers that I mentioned.
Thank you. Your turn, Brendan.
Specifically about cost center one,
Yes.
I would like to see the teaching positions added back in, because I feel like with all of the discussions that have happened between the meeting with all of the people, excuse me, at the school, and what we've discussed here, that our primary goal is trying to support the teachers, and adding positions, I think, is doing specifically that. So that is my main concern, that those get added back in. And I understand it's a big number, but like we had discussed, how do we get to 80%? I mean, it seemed like a crazy thing, but if we are hearing that they need the support, then I think that is a good place to start.
Thank you. Scott? I wanted to see if you were awake yet.
Yeah, right. I guess if I could be in charge for a day and not have a board and I could make all the decisions on my own, I would go through this budget as if it was my own home budget, and I would cut out all the fluff, and I would try to put back in the critical stuff, the teaching positions. Transportation is huge for me. I mean, that's what I do for a living, and you know, like everybody else, I'm sure the phone calls and the emails are getting kind of redundant at this point, and I would like to resolve that issue. But yeah, I think going through this with a very fiscal mind and trying to dig out the sort of fluff that we don't necessarily need. I've seen a few stipend pieces that I would like to eliminate. I know they're minor. You know, you're talking about $500 here and there, but at the end of the day, is that enough for a half a teacher salary or something? You know, there's looking at some of those things. I think there's a few opportunities maybe for some volunteer situations, especially with the stipends.
So you're agreeing with everyone about the teachers in cost center one?
If it's affordable, yes.
Okay. Laura?
I as well with the teacher positions and the lower classroom sizes. I think there's quite a few challenges when you exceed those numbers. So I think it's important to kind of ensure that those numbers stay low. Transportation, I have specifically a grant writer. I know that we had stated maybe a director of curriculum / grant, but I think a person dedicated to just grant writing would pay for itself. The stipends as well, forming additional committees, and then really thinking about some future spending and programming. I think it's important to continue to add programs and change, maybe not just always take them away. But I don't know, it's been very clear that we lost some science programming, and what else did we gain or add? I don't know, I really have heard that. So I think, everything's kind of changing all the time with education over the years. And I think it's important to continue to enhance and increase our programming for kids.
Bob?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the educators are the backbone of our system and what we're here for, to educate the students. My concern is that over the years we've added, as the student population has decreased, we have added a number of staff positions for new programs. And I'm not sure that if we were to go back and look on the day the RSU was formed to see what our staffing was for 1,600 students and compare to what our staffing is now for 1,300 students or less, that we would probably find more staffing and 300 plus less students. So I think I always found in my in my working career, whether it was in the military or not, if someone didn't have a 40-hour position or job, but they had a 40-hour position, they found something to do to fill the 40 hours because they couldn't just sit around, right? So people would develop things to go and do so that they would be busy for their 40 hours. And so when we had spare classrooms, because the students went down, we found ways to fill those classrooms with either extra courses or something else to use them, all that fall basically within the instruction lines. So I know that the people that were at the budget meeting strongly supported adding those positions back in, and that's great, but like Doug said, and they took it out of facility, so it didn't really cost them anything. And facilities always gets hit, and I know that's a different section, but it interlaces with cost center one instructional. So my concern is that for under instruction, that we make sure that we have the right number of staff for the courses that we really must provide, and then courses that we don't have to provide, but that are enriched courses, things like that, they really have to be judged. Are they really necessary? Do we have 10, 15 kids that sign up for it, and we're paying somebody $60,000 plus benefits to go and teach it? That's not the only course they're teaching, obviously, but so I think we have to be conscientious on what our staffing level and costs are, and we need to be able to explain that once it's been looked at, that it is the correct staffing level. And while there's always a desire to add more in some areas and take less and take more away in others, I think that's my cause for cost center one, is make sure that we do have the right ratio. And if some of that, I don't think we have fluff in the budget. Been doing this for a long time. Auditors come back and say it's one of the best they have. We budget well. Maybe the fluff is in extra courses that we don't really need to support. And it could be in any subject matter, English, science, math, whatever.
Thank you. Nicole?
I support adding as many teachers as we need for our students, regardless of the programs that may or may not be wanted or anything else in the budget. I do think, however, that everything else in the budget needs to be looked at to determine if we are funding our teachers, do we need to cut back elsewhere? I want to make sure that our funds, our community funds, are going to the teachers, which in turn is going to the students who we're here for. I also want to make sure that even within cost center one, that we are looking at anything, and I know there's disagreement on whether there's fluff or not, and maybe we shouldn't be saying fluff, or maybe we should. I think that there are line items that can be looked at, and I would support cost center one with additional teachers, whether it be just the science and fourth grade or more, as well as support staff, which I know is a different cost center, but if we have to compensate for, higher class sizes, if we have to, because of facilities, I mean, they're different cost centers, but everything comes together. So I think that we need to be fiscal and frugal with travel fees, conference fees, memberships, stipends, supplies, everything, to make sure that what we put out there is supporting our children 100%.
Yeah. Can you give us some of your lines that you're wanting to look at?
I don't have them with me. There was a lot of feedback, or some feedback about line item, whether we do them, whether we should. It's going to take too long. We shouldn't do this. We just want a percentage, and there was just a lot going on within the board. It was very tense, and I don't want to go through that. But what I want to see is that what we put forth, or what I will propose, because I'm also being told it's my budget as a school board, right? I'm supposed to develop it as a school board, me, I'm speaking not singular, though. But yeah, every time we ask something, it's put down. There's excuses, there's remarks that can't be done, and it's like it's not even considered. So I don't feel it necessary to actually go through that at this point, because it feels like it goes in one ear and out the other. So I would like all the line items looked at where there's especially an increase. And make sure that we're spending, if we're spending $100,000 on supplies, I don't understand why there's supply lines in every cost center. And I mean, not to discount, the fact that you gave us paper today and said we're going digital next year, but that's part of the budget. This is cost. Why is it in color? I could use black and white. I can see it in black and white or digital. Those are the things. Those are the cuts. Because if we cut there, then we can afford the science teacher, which I specifically asked about 2 weeks ago at the other meeting. Then we can afford the 4th grade teacher or any other number of teachers that we may need. I don't know that those are the only two. I don't know that those are the two. I just want to make sure that we give our students what we need, and so I don't have a line item to go through. Thank you.
Sounding like we're not, so the idea right now is I want a consensus. We need a consensus on cost center 1 before we move on. And without knowing really what you have, like, how are we supposed to be all in together if we can't all, sorry, I thought my voice was loud enough. If we can't all, so I want to go to our public budget meeting and I want us all to have our hands up and in support of the budget. So in order for us to do that, we need to know what your concerns are for those line items. So the majority of the board had wanted to go and look at their lines. So this is why we decided to come back here this evening and go through each cost center and ask each of you to kind of, what was your review? What was your thought? What can we do to make sure that your hand is raised with everybody else at that public budget meeting? So I'm sorry that there was confusion on if it was coming from my end, but this is what you have asked. This is the majority had wanted. So we're just wanting to know what are you wanting in each cost center that'll make you raise your hand in support of this budget. And so if you didn't bring it and you don't know, we can't, it's hard to move on, to continue to move on into the other cost centers if I can't get you to all consensusly raise your hands together in support. So on my end, it's getting frustrating because you're telling me you have this stuff, you have what you want, but then I'm asking and you're not telling me exactly where you're looking at and what lines you really think need to be adjusted or looked at or anything like that. So I just want to know, like, that's where we're coming from. So I think that's where some of the frustration is coming from. Christy?
So we want to get in the weeds. I know I asked about this last week, but the substitute teacher line is pretty significant for each school, decrease. And I'm hearing that we have ed techs and other staff that are being pulled, probably because the sub pool is small, and we don't have enough of a pool to pull from. So you're pulling support from teachers, either through ed techs who are then not able to do the work in the classroom that we desperately need them to do. So a question I have is, in reducing the lines, is that eliminating our ability to be competitive for substitute teachers? Do we need to look at what we're hiring substitute teachers? Like, how are we falling when we look at comparison to other districts, to make sure that the teachers that we do have are able to not feel guilty about being sick because they know that somebody else is getting pulled to cover their classroom. Like, that's a big issue. So that's one. And I would love to unpack, if we can, the stipends that are in each one of these. So what does that, not necessarily identify who's getting them, but like, what's the dollar amount and how is that figured? So is it figured like on an average teacher cost per hour? Is it based on, so those are things that would be interesting to unpack for me.
So the stipend amounts are based on the contract language, right? So the professional contract was renegotiated last year, and the stipend formula is in that contract. And so it's pretty much a tiered system. So the stipend committee met. They reviewed the different stipends that we have. They placed them on a like tiered leveling system, if you will, as far as base pay. And then in addition to the base rate of pay that they're assigned, there is a longevity addition to that as well, depending on how long the person has been holding that stipend. Right? So it depends on what the stipend is, and the base amount, I believe, was factored on, you know, how many students does that position oversee? What's the safety, you know, considerations? How many hours generally, or how much time is put into that activity? And I'm sure there are other considerations as well. But it was negotiated and the formula was set in last year's teacher contract.
So are those stipends for school day, out of school day, combo? Help us understand why somebody would be stipend to take on additional.
Yeah, I mean, most stipend work is for work that happens outside of their contractual work. So it's additional work that they pick up in addition to their regular job.
And I'm hearing that it's contractual, so we don't have a say in determining the stipend.
I mean, you have a say
During
in cutting them.
negotiation.
You have a say
It's-
in like what, you know, when you look at these bottom dollar amounts and you say, I want to reduce, stipends are an option for reducing. I mean, it cuts away at the programs that you've been talking about and the services that we provide for our students. So the stipends are broken down by, you know, there's athletic stipends, there's co-curricular stipends, there's also school-based stipends that support our teaching staff, like mentors, et cetera. So you'll see those outlined in the notes, like what stipend lines cover what particular stipends, but they are contractually calculated.
Then I have a question. It's not necessarily.
Can I ask another one about
Yes,
the
go for it.
stipends? So just adding up the stipends in these, it would be great to have a list. So my ask is a list of stipends. I think we got one last year.
I think you got it this fall,
Yes.
before our last budget vote, correct? Yeah.
So an updated list would be great. And then just adding up the stipend lines in cost center one, it's 106,000 roughly. So it would be nice to know how many kids participate in some of those as well.
Especially with co-curricular.
Are you, which cost center are you in? That you counted up for 100,000 more?
Yeah, one.
Is it one? Okay, so
Yeah.
those are your team leaders,
Yeah.
your so those aren't the sport and athletic ones, those are in the other. I just make sure
Yeah.
that we all know what they are. So our new teachers get mentors. So if you come in and you're new and you're working on your professional certificate, you would be assigned, and that person who takes on the mentorship gets a stipend. And then the team leaders are those teachers that meet regularly to talk about the school and what things need to be done, or for planning or tackling issues and those. So those are what those are.
Department
When-
heads.
Department heads,
The high
department
school,
heads,
yeah.
the high school.
One thing that would probably be helpful maybe is a list of them.
Yeah.
And then a priority, maybe like these are ones that are most impactful. And I don't want to do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these would be kind of like what we did before with teacher positions, is like these were kind of maybe lower or had opportunity to move. So that would be helpful to see.
Chris, you had one more?
Yeah, so then my question, and I don't know, so in some school boards, not necessarily this school board, the school board determines like a minimum number for enrollment for courses, particularly at the high school level, as a way to kind of manage the small class sizes and thinking about those things. So I don't know if that's something that we may want to consider as we're trying to determine the priority.
Diane, you had your hand up before Bob did, so.
Yeah, I'm looking at the projected enrollment. It looks like we have 5 teachers for third and 5 teachers for fourth. Is that correct?
You have in your updated handout,
Yeah.
it should be 5-4. We changed that today.
Oh, you changed it today.
Because it was an error. There was
So
an error.
that means that's going to put the class size much bigger than,
No.
yeah, you have
Because it's at 18.
5 teachers, and it would have been 16 kids each, so now it's
I think it goes to, well, do you have the current hand, oh, let me go.
Is that the new one
I'm going to go
today?
online, hold on.
I think, are you looking at page 6
Yes.
of the original presentation summary?
Sorry, Laura, yeah. This, if you want to do the calculating, just take your total divided by 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's 20, it would be 20.
20 a class.
It would be 20 a class,
And the
yes.
last time I had asked if we could get find out how many of those kids are not going to be in that class, that they received their services. They're only on there for, like a homeroom or whatever.
And I did ask that. Most of, I would say majority of the students, Nancy and I talked, there's only a handful that are totally self-contained.
In 4th grade.
Correct. Well, across the district. So Nancy, you could answer, maybe, hopefully. Like next year's 3rd graders, how many are self-contained? Don't think many when you gave me. Yeah.
And at the middle school level, that's going to change as well? Because one of those teachers will now be bumped out and taking the other position?
So the 5th grade would have 4 teachers.
Okay.
So I think that goes back to my question around minimum enrollment, because how is it okay for our younger learners to be in classes of 20, 16, 18, and then we have high school offerings that's for 6 or 8 kids? So that's just kind of where my brain goes.
Are you all set, Diane? I don't want to move on.
My preference, after seeing Donna's letter that she wrote, I would prefer, instead of a 4th grade teacher, an interventionist at the lower level to work with those kids one-on-one. Yes, we have Title I, but those people are not, those are ed techs. When I did Title I years ago, I was a certified teacher doing Title I. They've changed that, and those people are not, those are ed techs. They're being told what to do with the kids. But an interventionist is a qualified teacher that can work with those kids specifically to meet some of their needs. I know we have some kids that are spending all year in Title I. That's not we want Title I, and then they should be making those gains to move out of Title I. But for some of those kids, that's not happening all year. So they're always behind. We need something other than Title I to work with those kids.
Thank you, Diane. Bob?
Yeah, a couple of comments. First, addressing stipends. To reduce the stipends line, you really got to get rid of the activity that the stipend supports, because it's contractual, right? So if the numbers add up to this, then the only way to reduce it is to have fewer people drawing stipends. And then it is in this particular section, do we not have the department heads? Do we not have mentors? We can't change the dollar amounts because it's a contract, right? In the other sections, when you get there, it's like, do you want to have a lacrosse coach? Do you want to have 3 football coaches getting stipends, or 2, whatever it is? So, or Future Business Leaders of America, you want to continue that stipend position. I'm sure we do, but, that's how, if you're looking at stipends, that's how you lower stipends. And I would encourage everybody to go out, look at the professional contract. That's the teacher's contract. And I think it's probably Appendix 2 or 3 is the stipends. It gives you the formula. We did modify it the last contract, that it doesn't, in the starting number doesn't always go with the base pay. We locked in a solid number so that it didn't change. But there is, once you do it for so long, you're getting a certain percentage tacked on for each year above. So the numbers add up pretty quickly. And you'll also be able to see where the stipends committee place the most significance by the multiplier that's used. So, and multiple factors was brought up. It might be because the number of students that are in them, or the safety issues, or the dangers, or whatever. But, some people get a multiple of maybe 6, and some get a multiple of maybe 2. And, for different jobs. So please just, it's online, look it up. They could print it out for you and have it as well. And it's certainly not broke down by each cost center, but you can see which ones are athletic, which ones are co-curricular. So that's the one thing. And then you mentioned the interventionists in the lower grades. I think we get our best bang for our buck at the lower grades than we do at the upper grades. So the better class to teacher ratio we have at the lower grades, I think we have a much greater opportunity of developing successful learners that will succeed when they get to the higher grades. Because that's those minds, as we all know, you watch an infant, the amount of stuff that they go and learn in those first 5 or 6 years of their life is just probably more than they're going to learn the rest of their life, right? Just so much, and it goes on. So I think the interventionist is a great idea. I thought I had one other thing when the discussion was going on, but the stipends and the interventionists were the two that I remember to talk about.
Laura?
In regards to the extracurricular activities and stipends, is anyone able to volunteer? Like if there was 10 stipends cut for whatever program, like we had just done the outdoor one, if that one was to be cut, could that gym, I think it was the gym teacher, could they still run a program and opt to not take a stipend? You have to pay them? They can't volunteer to run a program?
As long as it's in the contract, you're going to have to pay. It doesn't have to be a teacher that does that stipends. Some of our coaches aren't teachers. So you'd have to take it out of the stipend schedule.
And I don't want to speak for them, but I'm assuming their labor representatives would tell them not to volunteer their time.
It's like rec sports, they're all volunteers.
It's rec.
Right.
Recreational.
Well, yeah.
Completely
Yeah,
different.
it's a little juxtaposition I'm trying to understand, because I feel like we're valuing teachers, but like the extra work that they do, I feel like that has value too.
Well, I don't think anyone has said that it doesn't, right? Like,
Well, I kind of wanted to more clarify sort of what I was talking about as, for instance, volunteer and fluff. So, for instance, I see Farm Day. We pay $510 for Farm Day. Like, we have local farmers. We have 4-H. We have Girl Scouts. Like, isn't there somebody within these organizations that can volunteer to put together Farm Day? Flag Day is, I believe, I missed Flag Day. $500, I think, was for Flag Day. Do we not have a veteran, somebody from the VFW, somebody that could volunteer to organize Flag Day? These are just simple, ski club. I don't have a list of participants in these things, but it's over $1,300, almost $1,400 for ski club. And I work at the mountain, so I know like they do a really good job of organizing, these different programs. We don't even need a ski club because they could just contact the mountain and put that directly through the mountain. So just some of these things, I'm just curious to know if they could disappear. And really, what's the participation level? Table gaming club, $800. What's the participation in table gaming? Or, gambling essentially. Just kind of some of these things, you add all this up, and
Generally, the stipends, they originate from a staff member either garnering interest from students or having an interest themselves that they want to share with students. Mr. Crocker is a prime example. He knew that students had an interest and he had a skill set to bring forward for a robotics club. And so he volleyed to have, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Crocker, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. But expressing an interest in something that you think students would benefit from, and then it goes through an approval process, is brought to the board and then negotiated for the stipend amount. So I understand where you're coming from. But they don't come, I don't think, from a superfluous place. They come from a place of genuine interest in enriching the lives of the students and the activities that are available for students to engage in. And then once they are memorialized in the contract, then they're there so that if we can afford it and if the interest remains, then the agreed to amount is there for us to reference and to pay equitably as we've negotiated.
so maybe a benefit to see what the benefit is, how many students are actually participating and are they benefiting from
So in your previous, last week, you had all the participation rates of the clubs. So you can refer to that handout for that. And then there's specific ones, the principals, we can make sure they get the information
I also
for you.
have a really hard time understanding why some of the stipends aren't just part of your regular salary.
Can you give some examples?
Sure, like the building emergency person, like why, and that goes to the facilities administrator, why isn't that just part of the regular duties of, I would think like building emergency safety situation should be part of that. So just trying to find out how or why that, that's one example I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, just to reiterate, everything people do is helpful and appreciated. I just, I mean, we're trying to deal with a budget, so, as far as the stipends and stuff, nobody's trying to detract from anything, I know I'm not, so I just feel like I have to throw that out there, because it's just, some of the stuff is that I always have in the back of my mind is that, as part of this whole trying to figure everything out, is that Maine teachers are some of the lowest paid in the country, and the stipends kind of help supplement that. So I know it could be built into their contract for some duties, they probably could, but their contract's already pretty low with everything, and then because of all the budget things. So I think that's an important thing to kind of remember. We want to keep professionals that are good. And having been a teacher for 8 years, I left teaching in Maine because it's financially a very challenging thing to do. And I just always keep it in my mind that taking away any kind of way that they can supplement their income and then expecting them to do more is always something I'm always would want to be leery of with some stuff. I don't know. Is anybody, I mean, on the board, we have a couple people that have taught before, right? Like,
Yeah, and I can talk to some of those stipends. I know I did Flag Day and Farm Day.
Diane, closer.
Your mic. Sorry. I started Farm Day in the district because at the time, they had cut all of the field trips. We had no money in the budget at that time. So we used to have the farmers come to Sabatis Primary and do everything because we were a union. Well, we weren't together yet. So I used to do it there. It's a lot of work managing, getting all the farmers out there and everything. And then as it went on, it got more and more, there was more to do because now I included the whole district. And so the amount was, I didn't get paid at first, but then the principal at the time said, you should be getting paid for that. It's a lot of work. I would go set up like day before, whatever. And so that's how it ended up being on there. And it also depends on how many kids are involved in it. So Farm Day was K through 2, but it used to be K through 4. And then when the school moved 3, 4 down to Carrie Ricker, then it just ended up being K through 2. And then we got together with the Litchfield Fair, and so they included us there. So we didn't have to do that legwork, but we have to go there, we have to set up. We call all of the people to, who volunteer and all of that other work. So it is time consuming, it's a lot of work. Just like Flag Day too, I meet with the veterans and, different organizations. I make sure that the kids are prepared. I have the script. That all came, that used to be K through 5. It hasn't been K through 5 in a while.
I guess I had a second point to make is that I do agree that there are stipends that probably don't serve a function with that. And I guess I just wanted to say that all my stuff before is that everything with this budget is very holistic. Everything is interactive with each other. So we can't just cut one without thinking how it impacts the other is the point I'm trying to make with each little thing. So if it means cutting stipends and we could put a position, in my opinion, I think I agree completely. If it means just cutting stipends just in general and I think that's going to hurt. So you know what I mean? We can't pull any one piece without being aware of how it affects everybody. And I just want to say that for the record, to be out loud.
Well, let
You
me
know,
clarify to you. I don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut anything. I mean, if I had my choice, I would add a lot more to this budget, to be 100% honest with you. But the fact of the matter is that living in Maine, we're the third highest tax state in the country. We have the third highest energy costs, and it's only going to get worse, and people can't afford it. So we need to be very mindful of that. And if the participation rates in some of this is low, at least going forward, we need to be really mindful of what we're adding as additional stipend positions. But if it was me, I would add. There's a lot I would add, and I'm definitely not discounting anything that anybody does. And my kids attend school here. I'm grateful for the education and everything that they're getting. And, but yeah, is it a need or a want?
So perhaps like classes, where they don't have enough participation, that the class is canceled, that would happen with stipends as well. If there's not enough interest, maybe setting a limit of how many kids are involved in that, and if there's not enough, then it doesn't happen.
So getting back to cost center one, because the stipends are going through is if we want to look for things that could be reduced in cost center one, I would encourage everybody to go those few pages in cost center one that says no salary and benefits, all right? Because those are the supply lines, those are the things that are not contractual. So they're not salary, they're not wages, they're not the benefits for the staff. So cost center one is down $2,800 over last year. It's still a sizable number, but you can go down and look at, it's like 3 or 4 pages of what does not include salary or benefits. And if you're not looking to cut staff, this is your only place to look, all right? And that's the same in every cost center, is they were nice enough to split those out so we can see in its own section what are not tied to staff people directly.
Oh, sorry.
I guess then for productive approaches, then if we could get enrollment numbers for the stipends things, if that hasn't been specifically asked for, if I missed that.
They're in your PowerPoint from last week.
They're in the
Last
PowerPoint
week.
from last week. Okay, so we'll look at
By
that.
school and by co-curricular and extracurricular.
Okay. Look for those.
But that doesn't cover cost center one stipend.
Yes, no, you want how many team leaders and department heads are in each building?
Yes, so
That would be-
those would not have enrollment attached to them, because remember, some of the stipends are there to support the work of the staff. Like by statute, our new teachers need to have a mentor assigned to them, and mentors get a stipend for doing that work.
But those stipends are in the non-negotiable part, right?
Yep,
So-
they're in the
So-
salary line.
Those you couldn't even really touch.
Well, I mean, to be
Right.
clear, like, it's not that they're non-negotiable. The numbers that you have there just represent staff costs. That's what we try to do. Like, if you're looking at salary and benefits and you want to reduce those lines, you're talking about reducing staff or reducing what staff do to support our students and each other, right? If you're talking about the lines that are not attached, that's what's split out in the third report.
And I guess for my follow-up is that, is there a way, if we were, so the science teacher that spoke to us, he did robotics as an extracurricular and wanted to teach robotics, didn't have that opportunity. Is there a way to flip that maybe if we cut a few of these stipends, which again, my point being is that it's a sensitive thing. I'm aware it's sensitive. I'm just trying to say that I'm aware. If we cut the stipends, could we use that to fund the teachers that could then teach the classes? And could that then be a way to get a teacher and get that activity still in there? You know what I mean? If we hired a science teacher that taught robotics, but then as a way to pay for that, we cut the stipends that were robotics after school, which I don't know if the teachers, I would want input from the teachers on that. But.
Or even add stipends, okay? 'Cause
Yeah, just-
you're talking about $1,000 stipend to add to a teacher's salary to teach robotics that they could potentially do as an extracurricular. They're getting the same enrichment, but
Yeah.
it's a whole lot less for $1,000 stipend versus a whole nother salary.
Yeah, I mean, just ways to think about it, I guess I'm throwing that
Yeah,
out
I mean,
there.
your specific example, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just wait, just hold up.
Oh, is it my turn? I just want to make sure you guys are done. Were you going to say something, Kate?
So I'm going to wait till I hear from you then.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to comment. I agree with Bob. I was focusing on the non-salary line items. Thank you, Sam. I did go through this. I asked for this, the actuals in January. I wanted the actuals. I wanted to go through them. I wanted to go through this budget with an informed decision on how to come together and say, this is the number. So thank you, because you did put a lot of time and effort and information into this, and it was very helpful. And I did go down through every line item in the first 7 cost centers. But when we sit here and we hear, well, if you cut a certain amount, the teacher's the first to go. We're not going to put in the science teacher that you want, then I can't come here and say, I want to cut stipends or supplies or this because it's in this cost center. We can't tell you how to do the budget decrease for that cost center. We could just tell you how much to decrease it. And we've also heard that at the public meetings as well. So that's where I struggle. So if you want me to come up with a number, I also asked for the non-negotiables. Because I don't want to go through willy-nilly and say, I'm going to cut this and I'm going to cut this, and it's critical. I don't know what's critical. And I wasn't given that information. I don't have that information. Even with the very useful information that was, Sam, that you did put in, still doesn't give me that piece, right? That was the whole point of going through it. But I'm going to be 100% honest. I felt like it was useless to come here tonight and to continue with that, with the comments that were made or the feedback that we get when we're trying to get that information to not just make a silly decision.
So to piggyback on that a bit, I absolutely, when we reflected after, you are in a tough situation. No doubt about it, because we work for months putting it together. We go on the mind frame of this is a needs budget, right? And what can we bring in that we feel is fiscally responsible and meets the needs? And then you're going through it thinking, okay, well, how am I going to support this and what does it look like? Because you're right. The reason you get the sense of defensiveness is because we live it every day, right? You don't. And that's just the way it is that we live it. We're gathering information about it, and then it's hard when we're trying to justify why we put things in it, right? So I totally understand you're in a hard spot. Because you're right, if you say, cut all the stipends, you're going to have people come out and say, well, we want our department heads, we want our team leaders, we want our mentor, so you're in a difficult spot. I get it. And my job is to try to help you with it. So just like Cost Center 1, what we did last year is if you said, we want you to put the teachers in, and then Cost Center 1, we want you to find reductions to offset that $208,000, and I proposed this is how I would get there, because you're right, all the supply lines in Cost Center 1 are based on teachers' input. The teachers gave us a list of what they wanted for the principal. The principals then fed that to us. Professional development is important to them, so that's why you see travel and conferences, but you might say, we don't want any conferences. We don't want any travel to any conferences. We don't want field trip, so I understand that. So that does make it very difficult. It's a difficult process. So I empathize with you on that, and it's hard for us too, because we know all the things that go on that are sometimes behind the scenes. So when we bring the budget, in our perspective is we've done a very thoughtful, looking at it, saying to people, no, that's not going to fly, that's not going to be accepted, so we try to listen to what we've heard. The teachers were in here again because they're not filled, and Ryan's absolutely right. It's going to be critical that all staffing, if staffing is not touched at all, it will be critical to support the budget and where we get to without any staff reduction. Because if we go ahead and say, I want those teachers in, and we hired those teachers, and then we can't get a budget passed, we now, so it's a quandary. This is what we live to. So I understand it. So another way to think about it is you could say, we want the 2 teachers in. We want you to go back through the no salary benefits group and identify getting feedback around which can be reduced. And then we bring that to you, and you might see things. Last year, there were things on that, and you picked and choose. It was like a menu. We really want this, but we don't want that. We really want this, but we don't want that. And so I understand. It's hard. It's a hard process.
I guess human nature. It is really challenging to try to not come up with a solution when you're putting an input in or removing something. So I apologize if I keep doing it out of just natural inclination.
No, I think it's just, I think it's natural.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
it's not intended to step on anybody's toes. Yeah, I guess I just, with that.
May I address a question I feel like was asked earlier? Nicole, you asked about, supply lines being in each cost center. And I think there's some members of the board that are relatively new, and I feel like that's really important to understand. So the way that the accounting is set up from the DOE, from the state of Maine, is that all of those lines belong in the cost center that they're supporting, right? So when you see supplies that are in maintenance, those are the supplies like toilet paper and things to the plant operation, right? When you see supplies that are in regular instruction, those are the classroom supplies that teachers use to support regular instruction. When you see, even if you look at my department, fiscal services, supplies, those are our payroll checks, AP checks, like supplies that are specific to that department. And that's the way the coding structure is set up, so that you're designating those costs in the cost center it belongs to, and you see that full cost to operate that specific group or section that the state has called out. And so you'll see a lot of those no salary and benefits lines, they are repeated in every school, in every department. You'll see that repetition, but we're not being redundant and ordering the same thing in all those places. They are the things that are specific to that department and that program when they're coded that way. If that is helpful.
Can we get back in the weeds of no salary and benefits questions? I guess I would love to understand line item 38, which is contracted services for the high school, with a $24,600 increase. JMG contract, which I know we get a lot of bang for our buck for that one. But I don't know Telling Room and Portland Stage Company and why it is such an increase. So that would be helpful to know on that. Also, just kind of comparative, which I know each school operates a little bit differently and has a different enrollment, but the high school budget is $119,000, and then looking at the elementaries and middle schools, they're at about $25,000 to $37,000. So that's something that I pay attention to in terms of like equity and disparity. And I know each school needs different things, but those are two big ones that I had questions about.
Sure. So line 38, we talked a little bit about it last time, but I just will point it out again. The bulk of that increase is the JMG contracts. Knowing that we needed to make reductions in the budget and have it passable last year, we reduced that line and paid forward the JMG contract, and so we built it back in this year. So in essence, we skipped a year.
So what's the actual for just JMG?
JMG, I believe, is $27,500, but I can look that up for you.
Okay.
And that contract is given to us annually.
And you can see in your enrollment how many students that.
Yes.
That's good.
Can we move on to cost center 2? Special education.
Do we feel like we have a?
I'm
I
hearing
know,
put
I
the
don't-
teachers back in.
Yes, there's
Is that-
yes.
Do you
but
want to
there's-
give
I
a
think
thumbs?
There's
Yeah.
more,
You want more discussion on that?
there's more, obviously, that they're
Okay.
wanting from,
Cost Center 1,
they want.
you want to see a consensus that the teachers go back in? Yes?
Yes.
Or do you want, okay,
Two teaching positions. I don't.
two
know if we-
teaching positions back?
Do
Well,
we
are you still proposing to remove the 5th grade as well? So you want 3 teacher positions back in, or?
Are you, okay, so remember the the 5th grade position was serving to replace the dean position that we did not put in the budget. That's all.
So you mean
You're
three
asking our people.
classroom teachers?
Right. Because the proposal was to reduce 5th grade to 4 teachers,
Mhm.
4th grade to 4 teachers, and the high school science teacher.
Correct.
So that would be adding,
I see what you're saying. You're adding it in addition to the PBIS specialist that would replace the dean. Because that's already in.
because then the PBIS specialist is in cost center 1 or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then, can you help me
But they're
with,
not, that person's not in the classroom anymore.
correct,
So we would be losing a classroom teacher.
So what I'm
And
hearing.
That's what your concern is what I'm.
Right.
Yeah.
right,
So I'm hearing Laura proposing to put 3 teaching positions in the budget.
So the classroom teacher size stays the same as it was proposed last year,
right,
even though 2 weren't filled, but as it was proposed last year. So
Mhm.
the numbers, going back to what Christy's saying, it sounds like we should have a quick discussion about minimum enrollment, preferred minimum enrollment numbers for classrooms, instead of just skirting through that, so that we can then dictate how many teachers we feel would be
I feel like that would be new business, and we would have to wait.
Yeah, that,
new business.
that's why
That
I'm
would
saying
have
that
to
they
go to-
weren't ready to make a decision about the teachers yet, because they were still wanting more. That's why I didn't ask about the teachers yet, because they were asking for more.
And part of me wonders if it makes sense for us to prescribe where they go, or we're able to look and do, you know what I mean? Like, it needs to be based on need.
Well,
I know.
you either trust the professionals to put the teachers where they need to be,
Yes.
or you micromanage and you tell
Right.
us where.
So my preference would be to land on the number of teachers we'd like to see back in the budget and give it to them to determine where that would be. It might end up being another kindergarten and another 4th grade and not at the high school. It might, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like that's not in our preview to make those decisions. I feel like that goes back to.
So how many
I don't
teachers
know.
are you thinking to
I need,
propose putting in?
I need the data to
Okay.
understand, to be able to make an informed decision from 2 to 3. I'm definitely in support of adding 2 teachers back in. I need to know the ripple effect in terms of 2 and 3, and then the cost.
so I'm gonna, I think, disagree with you a little bit on some of those, because I think when you have people that are in the classrooms and continuously coming time after time and sending information, and then you have administration that's saying one thing and people in the trenches, if you will, that are saying another thing, and then you see these programs that biology, chemistry, physics, computer science, how do you not say, yes, we want to support that? Do you know what I mean? And like, okay, we'll give you a teacher, you do whatever you need to fill, but then you have people continuously coming week after week saying, we need this.
Mm-hmm.
And then administration saying they don't need that. I don't feel, as we've met, we need that.
So what I'm
Where is
looking
that
at
breakdown?
is the FY '24 course numbers, and then there's a comparison about by department for the high school. And then I'm looking at the ratios at our elementary, our middle school, and Carrie Ricker, and what the class sizes are. I know that the load is different, and arguably, I would say elementary is, that's a whole nother issue that got negotiated in contracts. But when I see that there's classes that are offered for 2, 7, 8, 5, ask our kindergarten and first grade teachers, can you imagine having a class that's small? They're looking at 16, 18, our fourth grade will be 20. So that's where my brain is going, of like, okay, so you add another teacher to the mix, they'll be able to offer more, but there's only so many students. So then that saturates the classroom sizes even smaller at the high school, whereas in our kindergarten through 8th grade, they don't have those choices of selecting classes.
And are there like some ed techs and things that help in the lower grades?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
If we can hire them, if they're in the budget. But there's also ed techs that help at the high school with students.
Rob?
I'm not, I'm not necessarily in support of hiring a science teacher. If you want to add teachers, we need to allow the administration and the building principals to place those teachers where they're needed. So what if we have a big bubble and people wanting to take extra math courses, but we got an extra science teacher? We don't have a math teacher. So if we have a teacher and they know what needs to be hired because they have the schedules, they see what the students have wanted, we don't end up sticking them in physics because they wanted to get calculus. All right? So allowing the people that we hire, that we interview and we hire, and have the educational experience, administrative experience to place the staff where it's needed. It's not our job. Our job is basically to set policy. We hire a superintendent to carry it out. We also are tasked with presenting a budget to the community for their approval. All right, so our job with the budget is to present a budget to the community, and then they can modify it as they did last year, and then it goes to the referendum. So we have to be careful that we don't try and micromanage because we're not in the buildings. We have a couple of people who are in the science department that come and spoke for a science teacher. If we'd cut a math teacher, we'd probably have people from the math department coming and talking, right? We all protect our own little environment. And I'm not saying that they're wrong and we couldn't use them, but we need to really let the people that we hire that are experts in the field do the job and not us try and micromanage.
So, again, just to say it out loud, because I'm also an external thinker. As a group, we're just trying to decide whether or not we want to supply the general with 2 more teachers for them to allocate. Right? I mean, while we have numbers, I mean, I don't think, if we're not micromanaging, I think that sounds like a decision that we could make today, or at least by the end of today, if we're just going to say that we want to keep 2 or put 2 more teachers in the budget, please, because we think that the overall class enrollment could justify that at some form, overall numbers. I mean, and then the rest of it goes to you to figure out that if the 2 more teachers are included in the budget, you're going to decide how to allocate them, which makes sense to me. Is that we are hearing from a lot of people and teachers in the public that it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, that 2 more teachers put into the pool of teacherness would be very, very well accepted and appreciated, despite with all the budget. And I know that you made a very, and we may very well cut that later on when the public speaks the vote. But I think that so far, it sounds like the public and everybody, I'm throwing it out there that if that seems like an easy decision today, and my vote is to put 2 more teachers into that pool of teachers, and then, so.
I was taking a look at the supply line. Now, our supply line does not include furniture and books, correct? So I was looking at the supply lines for each of the schools, and if you were to look at Carrie Ricker's supply line, it's $191 per kid. That's what their supply line is. Oak Hill Middle is $75 per kid. Libby Tozier is $140 per kid. SPS is about $90 a kid, and Oak Hill High School is about $128 per kid. So I know in the past, years and years ago, we were told this is the amount you have to choose supplies for your classroom, like $200, and that was it. Maybe it's time we go back to doing that so we can, because I know, having been in the classroom, there are teachers who have extra supplies, and if they pooled together, we probably could get through a year with what we have in our supply closets in our classrooms. And we could probably bring this down so we could have another teacher with some of the cost of the supplies. $144,000 is what the supplies come out to. So, I mean, if we were to cut that somewhat, we could probably get another teacher right there by cutting that supply line.
Right. So it's one of those that we would have to bring back to administrators to work with their teachers about reductions. So that's what we can do. I mean, we can talk to them about each of the items and see if we can't trim down. I know they're very thoughtful because they're told this is a need budget. It's not put everything on your wish list. High schools often have higher per pupil because they have a higher need of, I bet Ryan could talk about all the chemicals and all the things they need for all their science programming and their math. So I hear you, and I have no problem that if you're saying you want us to locate within Cost Center 1, $216,000 to put the 2 teachers back in, then next time we will come with, here's what the proposal is, and this is the impact of those reductions. We can talk to that.
Is that the census? Yes, no? 2 teachers back in and
Okay.
looking elsewhere. This side. Scott, Laura?
What did we have for an increase last year in the budget? 8%? We're probably heading that way again, looking at the broad overview.
Last year, we ended up at 1.7%.
Okay, sorry. But it looks to me like we're heading in the same direction for.
Yeah, we're going to be over 8.
Yeah, I just don't know how we can afford it without making cuts in other ways. If you find a way, or even on the revenue side, I mean, I know there's a bus sitting there that's not used. You get $50,000 for that. There's a bunch of side-by-sides that are sitting around.
We talked about that bus.
Yeah, not worth 50.
It's not worth 50,000.
It might be for somebody. I'm just saying, there's what about, why do we have brand new side-by-sides when we contract out for snow plowing and we have a tractor to plow sidewalks? Is there a way to surplus some of this extra stuff that we have sitting around? Do we still have the pellet boiler sitting around? Like, is there ways to get rid of some of this stuff and
we're looking
fund?
at selling that, yeah.
I just know there's a lot, that's stuff from the past that, when times were good and we purchased all this great stuff. Can we liquidate some of that and fund some things?
So right now, the question on the floor, so Scott,
I would be in support of adding 100 more teachers if we could afford
Okay,
it.
but right-
I'm just saying. I'd put in 2 more teachers, yes, if there was a way to offset the budget, so we're looking at a zero increase.
That's what I'm hearing, though, and that's what I
I'm
offered to
asking.
do.
That's what I'm asking. So
So
are we
where are we
adding
going
the
to cut,
teachers
where are we going
to-
to cut to add the salary so we have a 0 increase?
Well, what's challenging with this
Well, that's a
process is
different
we have to go cost center 1, cost center 2, cost center, we can't, it's all holistic and intertwined. You kind of have to go, I want cost center 1 to have this many teachers, just knowing that when we reach cost center 6, that's when you're going to be
Just
like, well,
not-
now I need
Having
to cut.
sat through a couple budgets now, it's just not going to happen.
I know, it's the whole
Telling you
style
right now.
is
We're going to
very-
add them, we're going to vote to say yes, let's add them in. You're going to get through all these cost centers, this is going to get added, this is going to get added, we'll get a little bit of a reduction here. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you're not going to offset it.
No, I
I'm just
agree.
saying. I'm a realist, that's the way it is.
So what I'm hearing is do we need to try to land on a number we're comfortable with?
We have done that in the past. Boards in the past have often went and said, we're going to hold you to a 2.3% increase.
Because
There it is. Bring us back the budget that will support 2.3% increase.
Because we don't need, like,
And
the cut doesn't necessarily have to come out of one.
Right.
Exactly.
Can we just move forward as is, and then at the end of the day, if we have the extra, we can throw them back in at that point? I mean, we're going off the recommendation from the administration. I mean, just go off their recommendation, move on, and if at the end of the day we have it, we have it. We can add them back in later. Maybe.
It's kind of what I brought up a couple weeks ago, is just what's the total number? I wanted to know that, and we just worked back, because going line item by line item, some people wanted that, and, you know, it's not meant to be any hostility, but I agree, this whole system's not.
So last year you had asked for a percentage, right? You had said when they came out in the beginning, they came out with 8, whatever it was. I think we were close to where they are now, right? We came back, you guys are like, nope, that's not good, bring it down to 5. They brought it down to 5, but then yet that still wasn't good enough. So they're trying at this point to try to give you the budget that you have been kind of asking for. Yes, it's at 8%, and that's not with the teachers in there. That's without teachers in there. So we can add 2 teaching positions in here and continue on and see where else you might want to cut. Or you let this budget go back to your public. We're not all in agreement. We all sit up there. Nobody raises their hand for anything. And then again, we don't get support from the community because we're not all in it together. So it's very hard right now to come up with some sort of consensus. I would like to see us start kind of moving on because we've been on cost center 1 for an hour and a half. So we have yet to really go into any of the other cost centers to see where they might have cut, where we could get more cuts out of. So, Bob?
Yeah, so I think Doug has a point. We do have the revenue numbers. DD 214's out, or 214? 270. 214 is my discharge papers and they have 279. So we know what that is. And I'm expecting that any increase in our budget is going to be mostly all local. Because we're losing state. All right?
Well, some gain, next week is revenue. Okay? So we have it prepared, and you'll be getting that on Friday. What I have tonight is the bottom line of where we are right now. And, you know, I can go through, I think this is what happened last time. I can go through 8, 9, 10, 11 for the bottom line. And you're right, you can direct to say, because I heard you say, Scott, maybe 0. That would be, with the 2 teachers back in, $2 million. And then we have the struggle, which is real, is if there's no touching staff at all, okay, that means facilities has nothing. That means administration, nothing. Central. So it's going to be back to that list of items, which we did last time, that whole list, and you choosing those lines. Because you're right, yes, I think we said this last time. There are definitely things we could add and we need and stuff like that, and then we're going to go right back around and say, what are the tax increases? What's the percentage? And that's where the struggle is. So I don't have a problem with covering the last cost centers, so we at least have big picture, and then we could jump around to the different cost centers and talk it out. Because that is what happened last year. It's like, I think we can accept 5%. We started there, the budget was not supported. We ended up at 1.7% increase, I think, close to that, 1.8, 1.7%. And it took a lot of reductions.
So-
Yeah, we were 1.34 at the end of the day last time.
And even as a board, we still didn't support that. And most of those increases were salary and benefits.
Right.
So, historically, we can go through the expense side. We don't do zero-based budgeting, because that's way too complex, right, for a budget like this. We go through all this, and then when we get the revenue numbers and we see what it is, then everybody has a light bulb go off, and then we start the discussion all over again, right? Because what's going to really matter is what number we can stomach, that we can present to the residents for their approval. So Doug has a good point that maybe it's the cart before the horse. So we go and say, well, here's the budget that we're presenting, here's the funding, and this is what it's going to be for additional local. The stuff that's mandated by the state, we can't change that. That's going to come down. But the additional local is what everybody really looks at. That's above and beyond the funding formula. So when you get that number and you go and see what that increase is going to be, and you look at what the mill rate computation we believe it will be, we're not always exactly 100% on that because some of it's not set. But then we can say, oh, if it's $2 million greater budget, I'm kind of guessing it's going to be $2 million more in additional local. Because I don't think we're getting just any more from the state than we got last year, overall. If it is, it's got to be very insignificant because evaluations have gone up in the towns like crazy. And our student population has gone down. And those are the two biggest feeders of what the state gives you. So if we get a little bit more, that's great, but it's still going to be close to, if it was $2 million, it's going to be close to $2 million in additional local. And that's a hard sell.
So I just wanted to say that I think some of the challenge is asking for discussion and feedback, and then talking about how much discussion and feedback. Like, yes, we've been talking since 6:30 about Cost Center 1, but I think it's relevant and I think it's important that we have a conversation about it for those reasons. So then I think when it's like, well, let's move it along, in that instance, like, let's move it along, let's just put it to budget approval next week. Like, what's the point in sitting here every week talking about it if it's like, we don't like where the conversation is, or we don't want to hear it anymore, move it along, just move it along.
That's not what I was saying. That's not what I said. The discussion is to be so we can come up with a consensus. And we're nowhere near that consensus. So at this point, the discussion isn't helpful. So maybe it would be helpful to continue moving on to the rest so you could see what else was brought in or put out, taken out, and then move on to another type of discussion after the fact. I never said that it wasn't meaningful or that I just don't want to discuss it anymore.
But how is the discussion not helpful when everyone's asking questions and we're having a discussion? How is it not helpful?
So Katie had asked if you guys wanted to add the teachers back in. And I had said, no, they weren't ready to do that yet because there was more questions you guys still had. So let's move on to the next cost centers so that we can get the information that you guys wanted more of and come back, and then you can discuss that some more with the new information that you asked for. Because if we continue to discuss it without this information you're asking for, we're still not going to come up to a consensus. So I'm just trying to understand, you only have so many weeks or here with this discussion, and you're asking for more information, so I figure we should give them the opportunity to get that information and then come back to discuss it some more, if that's what's going to make a consensus.
So, for example, we asked, did everyone want the 2 teachers back in? We don't have consensus right now. So, do you want to go to Cost Center 2? Consensus, does everyone want to go to Cost Center 2? So, if you're not putting up, what would you like to do?
I'd like to just skip to the end. If you could take
Yes,
10 minutes,
agreed.
go through every cost center, the increases, the total, because maybe it's a 1% increase and we can all live with that and just move on.
Well, the percent
Second.
increase is already on the page.
Second.
So, okay. Well, let's go down to, I've covered, can you, yeah, you know where I am? All right. So we reviewed what the overview was for cost centers 1 through 7. This page that we're getting to? No? All right. This is the overview of the proposed cost centers 8 and 11. A lot of you've heard a lot of this before because it was a hot topic in our first meeting. So we added 1 bus driver position. That is the only new position in the budget, is a bus driver. There'll be 10 runs for 12 drivers. The additional drivers will be available to fill transportation needs. So the next one is the Director of Transportation position, replacing the trip coordinator position, and will be a year-round position. And 1 driver will be assigned as a head bus driver and receive an additional hourly wage. And then due to the district not having a food service director and the district replacing the trip coordinator position, the Director of Operations will assume the food service role and responsibilities. So something up to debate is accepting the proposal that we've had a discussion on. If we're not going to do this, then we have to discuss adding a food service director. Okay. The budget drivers are the employee salaries and benefits, which is $1 million. And then you have the maintenance budget, the special education budget, which you saw, those increases were the tuition rates, our special education transportation, that's no longer being covered by the special ed local entitlement grant. And then there's other drivers. What I did here is show you the salary benefits differences and then the no salary benefit differences. So you can see the people and what's associated with the salary and benefits. Oh, sorry. Am I going too fast? Nope, that's all right. Is $1,025,941. And the addition to the non-salary benefits is $888,691. And then you can see where the different cost centers are up and down. The overview, so everything up to this has been rounded, and then this is the cents. Okay. Right. So last year we were at $21,577,585.37. This year we're at $23,486,544.82, which is a $1.9 million increase, or 8.85%. Showing our per pupil costs comparatively to those districts that we've been comparing all along. We have that. And so that's the bottom line right there. Whoops, can you go back one? Sorry.
Doug?
As a board, do we think that they'll accept this?
No.
What should we do about it? Should we go back through and just focus on deductions instead of having zero discussion about addition and only discussions about deductionable areas that could potentially be suggested?
So I think like what I said at the onset, I didn't come with my line items because I didn't feel like it was beneficial. I know that was asked for last year, and I wanted to see the actuals so that I could prepare. I asked for them in January, so I can come here with a number. I don't have a number because I don't have that research. I don't have the facts. So at this point, I don't see that it makes sense for us to go down through. We all have ideas and thoughts on each cost center and those line items within each cost center. I think we've offered some ideas and solutions. I like Diane's about the supplies per pupil. I don't like the comparative because, Lisbon may be next door, but there's a lot going on over there that I don't even think people here realize. They have ed techs on every bus, is what I hear. They have their head of transportation also doing many other things and driving a bus. So we'll get down into the nitty gritty of all of those call centers with facilities. We have the whole RSU4 withdrawal looming over us. We have the finance committee, special committee about that. There's just too much. And again, we keep offering ideas or ways to cut or to come down and or offset, and we hear a lot of, no, we can't do that. And it may not be in those particular words, but it's no, we can't do that, or no, we're going to do it our way. So what's the point? Is unfortunately what I'm hearing. I'm not going to speak for others.
Wow.
So I would say put it out to the public, let them decide, like they did last year.
Doug?
Are there any non-micromanaging topics that we could try to address? I mean, I'm trying to think of a way to make this into a positive use of time so that we can at least do something. Instead of just, yeah, Bob?
Yeah, I think the other slide there that showed all the cost centers, the differences, showed split out between salary and benefits and, right, so if we look at, there's 888,000 that are not salary and benefit lines. So if we eliminated all the increase in salary in those lines, that would still leave us a $1.1 million increase. And that's without adding any positions in. So we really are talking, if we want to get this budget down, so a 1.1% or 1.1 million increase would be, what, 5.5%, 6%?
A 1.1 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's digestible or not, but
Yeah,
the
every
cost.
percent is 216,000.
So 100, we know that costs go up because non-salary benefit also includes fuel for the buses, fuel to heat the buildings, a lot of other things that we have to have. And I don't know about you, but I paid more for fuel this year, and I expect to pay more for fuel next year because somebody's got to make a lot of money someplace, right? So they keep jerking the system so that we have to go and pay it because we got to have heat, right? So we really are limited, and it's not that people don't want to make the change, but we would have to be specific on lines and agree that this is what we want to cut, or we have to be specific on a number that we want to settle at, have them come back with what that would look like, and with maybe a couple options. We put this in, but you might want to put this in and it offsets, so we could have some options, but, you go down and you look for $500 here, $500 there, and you can find some of those that you want to get rid of. But the bottom line is, it's not going to lower but 1/10 of a percentage point if we're lucky. So it's a big number, and it grows because we give salary increases. And we're in negotiations, so we don't even know if this number's right. Right? So, there's unknowns that could increase this number even more.
So I have a thought, which is last time we brought back like different intervals, okay? So it could be the first percent is 215,000, what would you do? What would you do with the second percent, a third percent? So we'd be going up 216, 216, 216. Okay. And Nicole, I appreciate your honesty about feeling a certain way, and I appreciate you saying that. I think what I'm trying to do is when you identify something, I want to clarify what that means. It's not that we couldn't do it. We can do anything you say and we would have to live with it. What I try to do is when you point out, well, cut the stipends, I want you to understand what the impact of that, not saying we don't do stipends. So I want you to know that it's more understanding what's behind it. and not saying we couldn't do it. We can cut anything we need to cut to get to a number. I have to, as superintendent, tell you whether I think that's a good thing for the district or not a good thing. That's my job, in my role. So that's why sometimes when it sounds like they're not listening, they're not going to do what we ask them to do, I have to also say, what's the impact of a decision like that? That's my job. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't just inform you, just, if you do that, this is what would happen. That's all. But I'm willing to come back with a list of reductions, starting and showing you different levels, and then you decide. I think last year, we did that, and you added things back in, and you got to different places. So we can do that again. And you can say, I don't agree with that. I would rather see this from what I've identified. But that's fine.
I'm thinking hard about this. I think for me, the pressure I feel to want to do something with the budget this year is having lived through that whole experience last year, going to vote so many times. I don't want to relive that. And I feel like the only way is to be actively involved doing something different. But I don't think there's any way to do anything. I'm getting the impression this is kind of like the mortgage on your house. You're kind of stuck with what you got. Every now and then you can kind of refinance, but you kind of... So maybe we're approaching this differently in that maybe it's about trying to somehow increase the audience numbers so that, or something, so that people are more aware. And I know we post it all over the place. I see this all over the place. But I know I'm going to try actively to get people to look at this stuff, because I think that it's not about trying to actively affect this budget that's so locked in stone with what's going on. I think it's about getting people understand why it is what it is and what it is what it is. And I mean, there's little things we can do. Obviously, I'm not stopping that. I think that's my stress with it, and why I feel so inclined to keep trying to do something. Because the not putting 2 teachers in, there's going to be quite an outpouring for that. But we're also at almost 9% when, and that's not the slide up, but 8.8% right now. So, yeah, 8.85. So you guys have a very good point, that if we put 2 more teachers in, that's 2 more points, right?
About one.
One more percent. So 8.85, we all kind of agree that nobody's going to want that, but.
You got 9.5.
Yeah, 9.5. I guess it stresses me out because I don't want to relive what happened last year. So I would like to avoid it and do what we can. But I don't know if we're going to be able to do much to avoid a number, just the way life is right now. So, I mean, I might be wrong. Should we try to be more active about getting the average voter to be more aware about why the budget is what it is and how it got that way, instead of spending the next 3 weeks debating on something that I think we already all say we were going to just accept it as it is anyway? I don't know. I'm trying to put more better use of the time. I don't know, or want to put more better use of the time, please. I don't know. I don't know. I'm looking for feedback, I guess, if that's way off.
Cost Center 2 is a non-negotiable, correct? So why don't we highlight that? We shouldn't even touch that. Like, highlight it so we know we don't have to deal with that cost center, because we can't change it. We can't reduce it.
Right. We can go back and look at some of the educational technician positions, because Nancy, all through this budget, she and I met again last week for a good hour to go back over caseloads. So there may be room in there. We'll be staffing, though. This is what I'm talking about.
Do that, though.
Right.
That's what we
So
need.
that's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Is
That's what I'm saying, non-negotiable. We shouldn't even be looking at that one to cut.
I've been in meetings where the public wanted to cut it,
I know.
You want to cut it, and then it'll cost us much more in the lawsuits than we could ever save, and we're going to end up doing it anyway.
But they're not educated enough
I know.
about that part of the budget to make a.
And the general
informed decision.
public, for the most part, isn't educated about the budget process much at all. It's like last year, how many people got up and said they wanted to have a voice in negotiations?
Right.
They just can't,
You can't.
right? You just legally can't. So, but many people went and said, who said all that? We didn't approve that. No, you didn't. Your representative that you elected approved it. So people that are satisfied rarely ever get involved. They sit on the sideline because they're satisfied. And so until it impacts them or they become unsatisfied, they don't show up to vote. We looked around at the budget meeting. We have, close to 100 staff members that live in our districts. There was maybe 5 of them there for their own budget. They didn't come out to vote for their budget, so if it got cut, So, that's a population that should be at those, because they got a vested interest. So, it's an issue. We do need to get more people involved, not just because we think that'll be better for us, but it's better for democracy. And that's what this practice is all about.
Nicole?
I was gonna let Doug go first. I think your hand went up like right before mine. You can go first.
No, it's up to Bill.
I'm not running the meeting, so Doug, go right for it.
I was just gonna try and give you some feedback, Doug. Like, I feel the same way. Right? That's why I wanted the actuals. What are we actually spending? That's why I asked for the non-negotiables. What can't we touch? What don't we want to touch? I said I wasn't even gonna talk tonight. I wasn't even gonna talk tonight. I was that disgusted last week.
Does it actually?
That disgusted. Yeah, there is now.
It wasn't, she put it out to us.
Yep. I asked for it in January. Okay.
You're on the finance committee?
My misunderstanding.
Yes.
You have absolutely 100% ability to see actuals.
Well, I
You
asked
approve them,
Katie
you
for
think
it.
They're given to us at every finance committee meeting.
I asked Katie for all the line items for the entire.
You want it.
I asked Katie for it in January. So I was trying to do my homework. I wanted to come in here and say, okay, this is what we spent. This is the increase. Do we really need that increase? What is part of that increase? So that I can support the budget. So I can be up there this time around, not in the audience, supporting the budget. And you're right, the average voter doesn't understand. I'd never gotten involved before till last year. And there's just so much going on with everybody's purse strings right now that I felt the need to. And that's why I ran. And that's why I'm here. But they don't know. They're not going to go read this. They're not. It's our job to inform them, not just tell them to go find another budget on the website, which I liked whoever did that. Here's where you go. Because it's not user-friendly. Or you can get lost. Our average community member is not tech-savvy. So I feel the same way, Doug. I didn't want to even talk tonight. I wanted to be home, have dinner, and get to work. Because I have to go work tonight. Because at my job, it's all other duties as assigned. And I think that's what most of us struggle with certain things. But regardless of that, I don't think they're going to accept an 8.85% increase. And I know that a lot of it is salary and benefits and we can't touch it. So where else can we cut is the only thing I can think of other than just putting it out and letting them tell us like they did last year. Because it's beneficial because we want to do it. I'm invested. I'm doing it for a reason. But I also want to be mindful of everybody's lives here. I mean, everybody talks about how the teachers do extra. Well, I'm doing extra just being here, right? We ran for this. We only get $25, which I don't even think I cashed that check yet, now that I think of it. We only get $25, but that's for the meeting, not for the other hours I spend at home doing this, right? So we're all sacrificing. So we need to see the sacrifices here, or we just need to tell the public to tell us what to do. You're always going to have people who aren't happy. They don't understand the process. It's our job to educate them, not just tell them to go learn about it. And I think if we have those tools, if we give them the information, they have this out there. I've already supplied this to somebody. I said, here it is. Here, it's out there. That's all you can do, but you can't force them to read it line by line like we're doing, or we were going to do, or trying to do. So I don't know what else to say. Either go back and offset, get that percentage as low as you possibly could, where we're not spending $200 per student and still asking parents for supplies and donations, right? Either supply it or don't. And, or just send it to vote. That's my, and I'll try not to talk the rest of the night.
Thank you. So, can we just put this out to vote? Is there, like, can we do a preemptive vote and then just let the public know and get angry and then just speed up the process of going back to, to vote? I'm kind of being serious. I mean, is that something that you can do? Can we call a special meeting where we have like a town vote and then the public votes on it? And then at least we'll get input and maybe some level of guidance on whether they would even accept it. And then when November rolls around, we don't have to do anything if they already like it. And then if they don't like it, then we have months ahead of schedule instead of waiting until November for them to not like
Not
it.
November.
It's not November? I'm
No.
sorry. It was supposed to be.
It's not supposed to be, right.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be in June.
Okay, in
fiscal
June.
year
in June.
starts
Yeah.
July
It's
1.
supposed to be.
In my mind, I'm thinking November election. Yeah.
But that's,
Yeah.
that's for the referendum.
Yeah.
The budget meeting, all right, is at least, 4 to 6 weeks prior to the referendum. Statute lays it out. We can't throw another one in there.
No.
The statute lays out what the budget process is
Okay.
and gives a timeline on when, between certain actions that you have to do it. So it's pretty well set in statute on what you have to go and do.
Yeah. No. I just, because it seems like there's not too much to be cut. So, I don't know. Just don't know.
So the plan for April 3rd was to get public, it was, all that was on for April 3rd was public participation. So if next week you say, you know, we can publicize, this is what's going out, this is how much, before the following Wednesday, you know, we can push it out and see if people will come out and give their point of view. But it would be hard. Residents probably wouldn't come out because that's hard. And like you said, it's hard. Everyone's working and it's hard to do that. Yeah, it's a challenge. So the plan for next week is to go over revenue, which will give you a good sense of the taxes. I'm going to do a brief thing on the essential programming services. We're going to go over food service and adult ed, and then you'll see the big picture. And then, you know, I can start to prepare a list of a percent. That will be, so the 3rd was a public hearing on the budget. And then the next meeting, the 10th, was for you to come to some conclusion before you vote after April vacation. So, see where we are.
I still don't feel like we've given you a clear charge. Like I've seen this film before. This is exactly what we did last year. Like, I don't think it's fair to ask Sam and Katie to like magically come up with the things that we haven't given you directive of.
Well, I
And
am hearing
I'm hearing
it
two
needs to be
things.
reduced.
I'm hearing that it needs to be reduction, and then I'm hearing whatever, just take it to vote now with an 8%, even though we all don't agree with that. So I'm conflicted, I guess. I just feel like the communication isn't clear, and there's a trickle-down effect for us not having a vision of what we're asking.
Do we think we would have any better results asking us on the board to review those without salary and benefit pages, much smaller section, to see if we can find something in that $888,000 increase that we really want to have information on and get that in ahead of time so they can be prepared with answers on what they are. And then we can decide whether or not we agree that that amount should stay in there. The salary and benefits, if we're really trying to get it down to 2% or whatever, then we need to know which positions we want to go, right? Because that's the only way you reduce those lines. Stipends, we can't reduce, to be perfectly honest with you. We have a contract. So as long as there's a club working, we can't have a volunteer. And the contract says that club there, this is the stipends. So we could probably eliminate the club maybe, but have to remember that those have been set and established in the contract. There is a stipends committee. They supposed to bring to the board every year their recommends. That has been a little bit lax, I think due to a misunderstanding of the necessity to come to the board.
Well, this year you did approve the outdoor.
Yes, we did.
You
We
did.
approved the outdoor,
Mhm.
right? But in prior years, there's been a couple of things added in that the board wasn't aware of. And so that's one of those things where things just kind of grow. And you don't notice it until it bites you a little bit. So, I mean, we really do, and Christie's right. If people really have a problem with things that are in here, then they need to speak up and address those specific things so that they can be discussed, and the board as a whole then can either agree or disagree to take it out or leave it in. But just to sit back and know that you're not happy and you have particular things that you're unhappy with and you don't voice that opinion is a little disingenuous to what our responsibilities are as individual board members. So, I mean, short of coming up with a number, it's difficult for me, not being in the weeds daily, to know exactly what harm each item that I might want to cut out would actually have. So I can mention it, but then I got to get an explanation, as we have been getting, why it's there. Not that it can't be taken out, but here's why we have it in there now. It's the board's budget to be recommended to the residents to vote on. So this is what we put forward as a board, each and every one of us, whether we agree with it or not. Our job is at the budget meeting is to act as one and support the budget that the board as a whole has put forward. That's always been the practice until last year. So, it's the way things have been run and we get done. And if it's a matter of, here's the number that this is the highest number that we can honestly go out and support to the community. Give us what can come out of it, set the priorities, and we agree with them or don't, get to that number. And then it goes to the citizens. Well, I'm not sure, I shouldn't say citizens, the residents. So, I think when we see the revenue numbers and we see the breakdown of what it's going to cost additionally each individual town, that whole page that we see in the budget book all the time, I think I don't know that we sent out the budget book last year like we have always done in the past. I don't remember seeing quite the spread, but.
It was the same.
And when we went back to vote, we sent out like a bridged version, like smaller versions.
Right.
But the first one that went out was the full.
I think proof's gonna be, what's the revenue, what's the tax bite gonna be, and then we're gonna have to come up with a number that we can support as a board, and then work to get to that number. Because you will have people come out for public input on that April 3rd meeting. I can't be here, that's not, I have to fulfill one of my finance officer duties, organization, and so I won't attend that, but I'm sure you'll have people come out, and there'll be people that will not support the budget because they're the ones that will be fired up. People that support it aren't gonna come out and say a lot. It's just the nature of the beast. So don't let that small minority that comes out and speaks be the only thing that you consider in the deliberations, because there are people out there that will support it, or something in between, more likely.
Further discussion? All right, without further objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned at 8:42.